Hi, I'm Chet Su. I'm a member of an endangered species, which is Chinese American immigrants whose parents came here illegally in the early part of the last century. My father came from a part of China which is very mystical because it was the home of the first Chinese who came to the United States in the 19th century, who came as contract workers to build a transcontinental railroad from the west eastward, and who also ended up being gold miners, and then later they became the first Chinese men to settle in Chinatowns, especially in San Francisco. The reason that we have a connection with Coca-Cola, and the reason I'm wearing this old shirt, which you should excuse me for, as well as the C, is I wanted to emphasize the relationship between Chinese and Coca-Cola. The Chinese that ended up in the Mississippi Delta, like my father did in the 1940s, there were many of them who came, but they also kept their past a secret. The reason is because they came illegally. In 1907, there was an earthquake in San Francisco which destroyed all the birth records. As a result, a few of the Chinese men that lived in San Francisco, who are merchants there, got very inventive and sold their names to many young Chinese who are in mainland China. And it just happened that most of the Chinese that came from one little region, which is really out in the boondocks of southwestern South China. The area is today called Sayep, which means the 5 districts. And my father came from the most famous area, which is called Toisan. And if you look today at the railroad office station at Toisan, it has a big sign that says, "Welcome to Toisan, the home of the overseas Chinese." In other words, the Chinese that came to America and helped build the railroads and never got credit for their work, and who also later became the gold miners, and then who also formed associations to set up Chinatowns in places like San Francisco, were these same people who came from the same region of South China. My father came to this country in 1920 at age 11 or 10. He was sent by his family because he was the best and the brightest among the 7 or 8 brothers. And so he came, ended up working in a family-related restaurant in Merced, California. Later, he was able to move south to the Mississippi Delta. Why to the Delta? Because in the Delta, there were relatives who also came from the same Sayep region of South China. And as a result, he set up a store, a grocery store, aimed at poor black people and poor whites that became very famous in those little towns called in the Mississippi Delta. Not only that, but they also had a relationship with Coca-Cola. In China and in Hong Kong, before the revolution in 1949, Coca-Cola was considered to be a luxury item, only for holidays and special events. Could people afford to bring a bottle of Coca-Cola out and serve it to their honored guests? So when the Chinese came and settled in these little stores like my dad did in a town called Clarksdale, Mississippi, deep in the heart of the Delta, they considered Coke to be very special. And so when they were able to sell Coca-Cola to their black and white customers, many of whom were poor, they were very honored. Not only that, they sold so many Cokes that Coca-Cola in the Southeast hired a Chinese gentleman who did nothing but go all over the South and painted big signs on the side of their stores of these Chinese merchants and others all throughout the Southeast. And I understand he just died recently, but he lived in Memphis, Tennessee. So getting back to the Chinese and Coca-Cola, one of the things that happened in my little hometown in the mid-60s, by that time I had gone to Ole Miss, the University of Mississippi, and was like a junior there, majoring in political science and literature. And while I was there, unbeknownst to me, my father tried to buy a house in a poor white part of town. And back in those days, Chinese were not allowed to do that, but he tried anyhow because my mother was insistent that she had 3 grown kids besides me off in college in the back of this little store. So my father found this house, fixer-up house in a white part of town, poor part of town, and the man that it belonged to refused to sell it to him. And it just happened that the man was a local Pepsi distributor, Pepsi-Cola. And so as a result, my father was very upset and embarrassed, but he couldn't buy the house. And later he got a call that same night threatening to burn the house down if he ever bought it. So my father was very embarrassed and upset, but he didn't say anything. But it being a small community, all the other Chinese grocers in Clarksdale banded together, unbeknownst to me and my father, and decided to do a silent boycott of the Pepsi distributor. Because back in those days, in order to sell drinks like Coke or Pepsi, the bottler would have to get the empty bottles and return it to the bottling plant and then send it back to the stores. The Chinese were very sly, my relatives. And what happened is, whenever the salesman came to pick up the empty bottles, the merchants smiled at them and said, "Sorry, we don't have any." So as a result, after a few months, the bottler, who knew he had done something wrong by that time and his finances were hurting, decided to sell his business to someone else, and the Chinese then went back to buying Pepsi. But still, for a long time, Coca-Cola was the best and most popular drink, not only with the customers, the black and white customers, but with the Chinese merchants themselves, because to them, it had medicinal value. It was good, it tasted good, and because Chinese believe in herbal medicine, they thought it had super qualities and characteristics. Not only that, but living in the very hot Delta sun of the Mississippi, especially during the summer months when we didn't have air conditioning, they found that Coca-Cola was very, very refreshing. And so today, about almost 100 years later, my father has passed away, my mother has passed away, our store is no longer there in Clarksdale, but the memory of the way we live and the importance of Coca-Cola to the Mississippi Delta Chinese is a reason that we feel like that you as Coca-Cola International need to take on our cause. In other words, help us establish the first ever Mississippi Delta Chinese Museum to be established in Delta State University in Cleveland, Mississippi. If you'd like to help and talk to us, I would be glad to consult with you, as well as Frida Kwan and the other executive members who are helping her, and Raymond Wong, who's the president this year, to try to get this thing become a reality. We're all becoming older and we need help of younger people, but we also want help from a business partner that's been there for us all these years, which is Coca-Cola. And as somebody who spent the last few years of my life as a consultant to anyone that would listen to me, including the university where I worked at, my consultancy was on the basis on the idea that race and class and political differences, other differences, do not matter. We're all human beings. And as a result, we feel like if you, Coca-Cola, will help us with our museum, we will help you spread the word that we know you really believe in when we hear that Coke commercial, "I like to see the world drink Coca-Cola," or something to that effect. Thank you very much for allowing us to do this short presentation with you, and have a good evening. Thank you.